Welcome to the Literary Globe Book Club Show. The idea is to showcase bookstores in Europe and to actually show you as a reader what it is like to run a bookshop. In other words, what's going on behind the scenes. The mission of the Literary Globe is to encourage our readers to buy books in-store and in-store online. Today we have the American Book Center. This store is also rated as one of the most beautiful bookstores in the world.
The American Book Center was started as the American discount book magazine, gramophone, and whatever, BV in 1972 by two Americans from Baltimore, Maryland. So they came first, tried to wholesale remainder books to Dutch bookstores in English, and that didn't work. But they had the idea that there was much more hunger for English language books than was being served. And so they just took over an old jewelry store on the Kalverstraat because it was next to Madame Tussauds. There were rows of people outside, and they thought that Americans traveling or other people traveling would be their market. So they just plunked in a whole bunch of books and opened the doors. And I happened to walk in just 2 weeks afterwards and said, I want to work here, and just didn't go away until they hired me. We started a second store in The Hague in 1977. And later a couple other ones in Groningen, Eindhoven, and in Leuven. We did some magazine racking in Arnhem, and this shop has been here now since 2005. And 1994, we started our internet bookstore online. We didn't want to just be a telephone book, just a listing of books, titles. We wanted there to be an interaction between our booksellers and the customers, because people, even in physical life, people would say, excuse me, maybe you can help me. I'm looking for this book. It was like in the 30s. It's about a dog in Alaska, and a bookseller knows that, That was kind of the model, and we're able to do that because we, all our booksellers are also the book buyers. So it's a very kind of homemade place with the team. It's an organic kind of organization. Sometimes it's a little bigger, sometimes it's a little smaller, but among us we have 700 years of book selling experience. People stay a long time. The way we compete with online booksellers is by being, very much ourselves. We are a community of book lovers. We have a lot of book lovers around us who carry their book lover card or their bag or whatever. Through social media, we try to keep that feeling of quirkiness and community alive, because obviously we can't compete only on price. Amazon's been losing money on books from the get-go. How could we possibly make a difference? We can't. So it's all about the personal things. For example, our ABC favorites. These are books that we've generally sold more than 1,000 copies of, and we know that our buyers know that these are ones that people continually want. So we put the sticker on it, which helps people to find something quickly if they're looking for a gift for someone else that they might not know the book. Books are going to stay. Stories will stay. The need for people to experience other people's stories is going to stay, and my feeling is that there are going to be there'll be much more interest in the curation, recommendation, community around books, more than just having a warehouse. You see people kind of turning against that model. It's just very handy if you need little plastic things or whatever delivered at home, but it's cold, and there's enough cold in the world. A bookstore is a warm place where ideas live and authors live and talk to each other at night when the shop is closed, I imagine. And they talk to me when I come in at night. And it's a living thing, and I think it will be valued as such.
Welcome to the Book Club Show. This is Jing-Jing Lee, who is the author of How We Disappeared, who wrote this fantastic book. We've got Amal Chatterjee, who is a lecturer at Oxford University in creative writing. And we have Lynn Kaplanian-Buller, who is the co-founder of the American Book Center, with us today. Jing, I enjoyed your book immensely.
Thank you, Liesl.
Can you tell our readers and our listeners a little bit about the book? Can you summarize this for us, please?
How We Disappeared
Yes.
is a book about a 75-year-old woman who lived through the war and has traumatic tales about it. In the year 2000, she has to come to terms with the stories that she went through and in a way has to find peace with what happened to her during the Japanese occupation.
And the title of the book, I thought that was so interesting. How We Disappeared. How did you come up with that?
I think I took about 3 years to really settle on a title. The word that kept coming up was disappeared. I kept using the word disappeared while I was writing the book. So of course after a while I caught on and I realized that I had to use that word in the title. And I think once I thought about how we disappeared, it just clicked. It
Yes.
sounded good.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about that as I was reading it the whole way through. It's like, but it makes sense. It
Yeah.
matches with Wang Di. I thought she did disappear.
Yeah.
Especially
yeah.
during the time that she was in the black and white house.
Yeah, in a way,
Yeah.
she's meant to disappear and to disappear herself.
Yes.
And
But also
by-
her life, she almost disappeared.
Yeah, and
Yes, it worked.
made to disappear by her family and by the social stigma,
Yes.
as you have
Yes.
mentioned. And it's only until the later years of her life that she tries to undisappear herself.
Yes. I thought the ending was interesting. You kept it open for the reader. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's hard to talk about this without giving too much away, of course. But at the end of the book, Kevin has to decide on what happened to Wang Di. And in having to make that decision, I think the reader should or would be reminded of the fact that Kevin is 12. And his choices, the choices that Wang Di presented him with in choosing an ending for what happened to her, are disparate in how tragic or how optimistic that end might be. And Kevin, of course, is 12 and he has had experience of his father's depression. You have to keep this in mind, but you also keep this in mind that he's still fresh in the world. He's still a bit innocent. He hasn't had experience of any kind of war. And I wanted to let it be ambiguous because you kind of want to hope that Kevin chooses for the most optimistic story, because then it reflects that he is still fresh, he's still
yeah.
innocent,
Enthusiastic.
and he's still hoping for the best of people.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you as the reader, you might have a sense that this might not have gone the way Kevin hoped it would be. So I want to let people feel how it might have been and how it was.
And can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because you studied creative writing?
Yes, I studied creative writing at Oxford, and I did my diploma for 2 years and then the master's, and I had a wonderful time there because it just exposed me to a different world and to so many wonderful people I could suddenly just talk about writing to. And I didn't have that opportunity in the past to just talk about writing and reading. My father is now, they're very comfortable, and for many years he was just a businessman. When I say just, I mean he had a very narrow focus. He was all about making money in any way he could. He was an entrepreneur, he made money, and this was the world he inhabited very comfortably and he knew very well. So anything outside of that, he was a bit out of his grasp. And even more for my mother, because she doesn't read, she can't read.
So this is, you becoming an author is inconceivable in a way.
I think it came as a bit of a shock to her.
Yeah.
Well, to both of them.
And now they're fine. They're proud of you. You've done well.
Only because I've been in the news repeatedly. I've been on the BBC, and I think after the BBC interview, they thought to themselves, okay, fine. they're still thinking about whether I can go back to Singapore to have an honest occupation, something that makes money on the regular, because as Asian parents who were born very shortly after the war, they were born with the mindset of you have to make money, you have to be pragmatic, you have to feed yourself. And we all know authors can't really feed themselves just by writing.
No,
Yeah.
it's a difficult career.
Yeah, it is.
Omar, what did you think of the book?
Oh, I enjoyed it very much. I mean, that goes without saying. But I mean, I think one of the things I really enjoyed about it is that when you're in Singapore, there are traces of the old Singapore. Well, they're actually very well preserved and very well curated traces, I would say, of old Singapore. It's very well curated. It's nicely painted up and made to look really pretty. And then when you're reading the book, you realize, okay, that's what it was like. That's what. It's not necessarily this glossy version that we're seeing now, and that's what the book does too, because it takes me back to, well, it takes me back, I wasn't there obviously, but it takes us back to where in a sense modern Singapore comes from, and where in some ways because the erasing or the forgetting of the past and the repackaging of the past, which of course happens everywhere. It's packaged its past in such a way, and bits of the past that aren't comfortable are repackaged, and that's what this book does. It looks at parts of the past, but in a sense it takes part of the past that has been repackaged and has been set aside, if you want, because it doesn't necessarily fit the narrative. It sheds light on that, but it doesn't shed light on it just as, and in some ways that a history book does, which says, okay, this is what happened, because this is a real person, and in a sense drawing it all the way up to the modern day and relating it to people who are here today and who don't necessarily have, right from the beginning book you see Kevin, who doesn't have that experience. He's got an experience of contemporary Singapore, and he is discovering, and we are discovering with him. And it's not a glossy history; it's a complicated history. That's what I find really fascinating. It deals with the topics in ways that are very accessible to us, because we have, again, without giving the book away too much, because you meet him very early on. You've got Kevin, who's 12 years old, and so we're learning the story of, we're learning all these stories with him as a major component. Well, maybe I'm Kevin. For me, when I'm reading the book, I read it as Kevin in a sense. I'm reading the story, I'm accessing the story as Kevin. I discovered it. Other people, I would hope, perhaps can do a much more mature reading of it. Perhaps they can read it as the older characters. But I have that. So I think that's, for me, that's one of the great, many of the great strengths of the book.
Did you enjoy the book, Lynn?
I did enjoy the book. Of course, it's not an easy book. I thought it was very courageous of the author to take on the topic, and also to do it in the way that she did, because it was very sensitively done, and yet true. It was authentic.
Deeply authentic, I
yes.
thought.
Yeah.
Disturbing.
Yes, and I kept wondering as I was reading it, wow, how is there perhaps a family connection here, because it was just so intimate and carefully done, and yet right on the point. It was also interesting that that you took on Kevin as the character of a 12-year-old boy. It can't have been any easier to create than a 75-year-old woman with a history. That was courageous, I thought, and an interesting way to tie the two parallel stories together.
Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
I hope to see the next book in the next couple of years. I hope that there'll be something on the horizon.
Well, I'm working on it, so
Great.
fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.